keep the time, please. I am currently unable to keep timestamps on the chat space. Thank you.
Proposition is here and we're all using one device.
Thank you. Please, can the first proposition speaker start the round? Start your speech, please, rather.
Okay, 1 second. I will just set up my timer. Okay, I will be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, before we start the substantive of this debate, I want to bring forth a scenario. Judges who have reached their position by virtue of their affluence and wealth can sit before you in a court of law, high and mighty on their pedestal, making decisions and then getting to go home afterwards, knowing that said decisions will bear no impact upon them in the slightest. Panel, is this sensible to you? First of all, Team Proposition would like to propose some framing. The first of which being, what is the obligation of a legal system? The obligation of a legal system is not simply to punish the guilty. It is to ensure that the community, the general public, has a sense of safety and stability in the society in which they exist. The second thing is, how is a jury picked and how are these roles allocated? It is a random form of allocation. Anybody over the age of 18 can be called in for jury duty, and there are regulations in place to ensure that the jury is representative and will not skew the rulings of the court in any way, because, for example, vested interest in the case and bias has to be reported. And if it is not reported and then it is later found, the member of the jury can be put on trial themselves, as that is a crime as serious as perjury. The proposition substantive case, moving forth from this, breaks down into two separate components. The first of which being why adopting a jury-based system is better in the legal context for decision-making. The second of which being the importance of reflecting community opinion in the legal system. Underneath the idea of better decisions to be made, there begs a question: why is it likely to lead to better decisions if we adopt a jury system? The premise under this is ultimately that corruption is existent and very prevalent in developing countries such as Uganda. It is very prominent in the Ugandan legal system in the form of, for example, bribery to judges. Thus, we need to eliminate that by adopting a jury-based system. And there are 5 reasons that fall beneath the idea of better decision-making for this claim. The first of which being that as a member of the community, you have a vested interest to keep your community safe. Your interest, your best interest in the case is reflective of the best interest of the entire community. It is not necessarily one of bias. You cannot be bribed like the judges in place of power. Your ultimate burden in this and your ultimate end goal in this is to keep your community safe, thus it can lead to better decision making. The second point of which leads from the first, which is elimination of corruption. Once again, these randomly picked people who you cannot know who they are prior to the trial cannot be bribed, cannot be corrupted, and because they have to report their vested interest, they cannot exist in a corrupt legal system, because once again their interests cannot be skewed. You can't manipulate the trial using them, unlike the case with judges in the world of the opposition. The third thing is that there is a spread of risk. So even in the worst case scenario, even if we take Team Opposition's best case and state that there can still exist corruption, and even if we make that concession, which we do not, we can state that even if one of, say, the 20 members of the jury is corrupted, there is a spread of risk because you cannot corrupt the entire jury. However, if it is a judge alone decision, there is only one man, one person that you have to corrupt, and that is, as I would assume, panel, it's easy to see, a much easier act of corruption and a much easier act to do. It is much easier to corrupt one person, to bribe one person, than it is to corrupt an entire jury. The fourth thing that falls under this is the idea of consensus. For a jury to function, there needs to be consensus. That is the integral element of how a jury comes to decision making. A jury cannot be divided in any means in a legal court of law. How a jury works is that the jury, after the trial, will go into deliberation, and deliberation can last minutes, hours, days, it does not matter. If all members of the jury, once again, say 20 members, cannot come to a consensus on what should happen, then the entire trial is dropped and a new jury is put in place. Thus, there is no hasty decisions on our side of the house, which will exist on opposition side of the house. Because once again, if it is only one man at one point in time doing all the decision making, panel, think of the judges who, for example, are in a bad mood for whatever reason. Their mood and their biases at the exact point in time of the trial taking place can cause hasty decisions that cause false indictments and wrongful prosecution that put the criminals on trial at a disadvantage. The last thing is that at the end of the day, it is you who knows your community best. You have the most insight to give in the court of law. Thus, a judge who is, once again, not necessarily part of the community in which the trial is taking place isn't the best voice of reason in the trial. It is the people who are part of the community who will then be representative in the jury that can give the most insight on what should happen. What are the impacts ultimately of having this better decision making? First, there will be better trust in the legal system, which has various net benefits, because people then are more likely to report crimes. There is going to be less community policing, thus causing more stability and once again allowing the legal system to perform its obligations. Secondly, people feel safer. Thirdly, there is, once again, as stated prior, less false indictment and more guilty people going to jail, ensuring the safety and stability of society as a whole and fulfilling the obligations of the legal system. The second thing under which proposition would like to argue today is that the importance of reflecting community opinion is an integral part of the legal system. The premise of this is as follows. Once again, as stated prior, you know your community best. And so why is it important that this insight is taken into consideration? Allow me to remind you of the framing in regards to the obligation of a legal system to ensure safety and stability for the public. We need to understand that some cases are not isolated. Some cases are nationwide. Some cases are so public that they incite moral panic, and public involvement in them is important for two distinct reasons. One, there is an emotional need for the public that needs to be fulfilled by the legal system by allowing the public to partake in justice. This emotional need will not be fulfilled otherwise in opposition's world, because the public has no say and no right to intervene or give a say in the proceedings of the trial in the justice system. So what happens in the absence of this emotional need being fulfilled? People will then need an outlet for the anger that has not been dissipated because of the lack of this being fulfilled. Thus, people can turn on their government, people can turn on the legal system, which will cause instability in the country, political and communal. So let us preempt very quickly. Opposition can say if there needs to be an outlet for anger, then clearly perhaps the jury will be irrational. However, as mentioned prior in framing and in the first argument, the structure of a jury is not conducive to irrationality. It does not permit it because of various regulations in place, such as the need for consensus and the need to report vested interest. So all in all, this will allow for better social stability because people will have an outlet for their anger. The last reason within the importance of people being reflected is that, as mentioned once and time again, judges are not usually part of the communities in which they give out rulings. They are affluent, they are the wealthy. And Uganda is a developing country. The vast majority of the population is poor or at the very most middle class. Thus, these people who get to then sit high and mighty in courts, make decisions, and then pack up at the end of the day, knowing full well that consequences will not fall upon them, that is not sensible, panel. What is sensible is the community that is being affected getting a say in what happens, because ultimately, they, as the most vulnerable stakeholders, are the ones who will feel the impacts and consequences of the rulings that take place in court. I have never been prouder to propose. Thank you very much.
All right, I thank the Prime Minister for the speech. Now I welcome the first opposition speaker. Ready when you are.
Hey, we get an idea on how it is in the community's best interest to keep each and every individual safe, so we should then get them have a jury. Firstly, we do not get why it's true. They never really tell us why the community actually cares about keeping each other safe, given the fact that these people are already poor, right? They want to get some sort of money for themselves. But also, secondly, right, we think that the argument of corruption or the argument of like being liable to money is actually symmetric, but it is worse on their
TOI.
side of the house. Why is it true? Firstly, notice that these individuals who are part of the jury individuals within society, or even if they have money, the money is not then enough. At this particular instance, they can then easily be bribed by different individuals to actually change the rulings that they would have wanted to change, because the jury isn't even chosen on that particular day of the case, but it is chosen prior and the public is told about the jury. So in these particular instances, they can be bribed. But also secondly, we think social media corruption then exists in society. Why? Many individuals within the jury might want to please the community because their names have actually come out within the community. This means that even if the person is not guilty, but the community wants that person to be guilty, they are liable to then make that person guilty within society. But even if opposition says that these people are then scared of being of some sort of backlash within society, we think that these individuals in the jury are lower class individuals in society and they have nothing to then lose within society. So even if they make bad decisions, it won't harm them. Secondly, we get an
TOI.
idea on like how governments can do anything within society because judges, because they have some sort of money, right? We tell you three responses. Firstly, we think that judges swear in before they actually take up the profession of law. This essentially means that they then swear to different proceedings and they always swear to be part and partial and not be corrupted by different individuals. But also secondly, given the fact that they are big figures within society, they are less likely going to make stupid rulings because they still want society to buy in. But also finally, they still want to be called to hear other judges or other cases within society. So they are most likely going to be partial. But also finally, these individuals have already
TOI.
accumulated wealth. This essentially means that they're less likely going to be whatever but because of bribes. Finally, we get an idea like how they are an integral part of the community because these people know the community best. Firstly, we think that the fact that they are using their emotions, it then becomes harmful to the criminal justice system, because even if the person is not guilty due to like some sort of thing that they had or due to like their mental incapacitations because of some
TOI.
similar crime happened to their parents, it then necessarily means that these individuals are then going to carry out impartial things and then they're going to like put people who are not supposed to be arrested to arrest. Moving on finally to our arguments. Firstly, on the first argument on criminal law and liability. The premise of this
TOI.
argument is that law is a very complex aspect that the jury cannot easily understand. Why is it true? Firstly, we think the nature of the jury in of itself is made of individuals who lack the expertise, right? Firstly, they are not legal experts. This essentially means that they do not understand the complex law because these individuals can be doctors, these individuals can be salesmen. Secondly, given the fact that they're just ordinary individuals, they're subject to different biases due to like the different backgrounds that they then come from. They can be influenced by social media personals in order to please them, but also finally, they can decide on an emotional basis. The harm of this is that firstly, justice is not served in the right way. For someone to access natural justice, the person deciding their case must understand the complexity of the criminal justice system. But their side of the house hinders on this because they do not necessarily show us how these people actually know these complexities. But also secondly, we feel like there are unfair rulings that then exist within status quo because these people do not then understand the different proceedings that are supposed to be taken. The importance of this argument is that it shows you that we prove our burden, how these people aren't actually the best people. But also secondly, we think that
TOI.
justice should be seen alongside being served. I won't take you. The premise of this argument is that as an accused individual, you have to know that the person determining your case is competent. In their world, the people determining the cases are not competent because of the nature of the jury, but also secondly, it can be influenced by public figures. The harm of this is that firstly, the principles of the criminal justice system are not upheld, but also secondly, there's a greater backlash from these individuals because you're then putting their lives within the hands of people who do not actually know. What then happens on our side of house? We have judges, right? These people have actually learned law. These people have actually studied and they're now impartial, right? They work on the rulings of the law and the different things that the governments have then put up. The impact of this is that firstly, we get justice served because the people who are hearing these different cases are people who are learned and people who actually understand the different proceedings within the law. But also secondly, we get better societal perception. Notice that the society that we live in then elects different leaders in order to make rulings for them at this particular instance. These judges are also put in place by these different leaders in order to help the people understand the different things within society. In many instances, we then achieve better societal perception because we then have better rulings. But also finally, we achieve the criminal justice system principles, which are accountability, through giving these individuals people who actually know the law to actually judge them and give the best of results. I rest my case.
All right, I thank the first opposition speaker. Now I welcome the second proposition speaker. Ready when you are.
Hi, just setting up my timer. Okay, I will start in 3. Is everyone muted? Okay, anyway, I will start in 3, 2, 1. I'll deal with 3 things in this speech. Firstly, the clash on framing. Secondly, the clash on actual legal consequences. So this talks about our substantive on better decisions, etc. Then thirdly, on the general public. So the importance of the community within this debate. Firstly, then the clash on framing. The first thing that they try to say is that these legal decisions are often so complex. We simply can't have the normal citizens being the jury, etc. And how a lot of complex decisions need to be made. But panel, that is exactly why we needed to be a vast number of people. That is exactly why we need different perspectives and people of different educational levels. Because these are different perspectives that need to be considered. Because note that a crime is not just black and white, it is nuanced. There are things that are taken into context. For example, why was this crime taking place? What was the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim? What is the context, where did this occur? In what scenario did it occur? These are very different things that need to be considered within a crime. It is incredibly nuanced that simply one singular person cannot handle. You need those checks and balances with you to consider every perspective, because simply crime is not black and white. But why then is it good to have these people as a decision making even in complex decisions? And note that we gave you literally 5 separate reasons from our first speaker, which they just conveniently decided to ignore on why for decisions. And let me bring it back. 1, because you often have a vested interest to keep your family safe. If you feel as if someone is a criminal, they pose unsafety to your community, etc., you simply will vote for them to be the criminal, and you see that evidence because you don't want your family to be in an unsafe position, etc. Secondly, because of the bribing that occurs with judges. And third is because even if, and I will take their very best case scenario where some people are bribed, this risk is spread out because of the plethora of people that are present within the jury. It is just simply not feasible to bribe every single person. But fourth then, because even if one judge is bribed, that is simply it. The decision is corrupt. At least in our side of the house, there is some risk that is spread out. But fourth then is that we don't have any hasty decisions. This means that if a judge is in a bad mood or the judge simply has a biased decision, at least with the jury, there needs to be a consensus that is made. And because every single perspective needs to be heard, it's unlikely to be one that is irrational or hasty, hence why we get better decisions. And fifth, because you are aware of your community, you have knowledge on the ground that is unique to people in the panel. Even if we take their analysis on people in the lower class, this is essentially knowledge that is exclusive on our side of the house. But secondly, I want to note then, even if this is true of their framing on how a lot of people in the community have low literacy rates, that's exactly why they need to be considered. They are the most vulnerable actors in this debate. Oftentimes they don't have any they don't have any protections with them. They need their voices heard, because oftentimes it is like the richer people, the richer individuals in society that get their voices heard, that get their needs most prioritized. That is exactly why we need to hear from the poor, the ones who are systematically most disadvantaged in society. That is exactly why we need those people. We completely flipped their framing, and even if their framing was true, we are still better for the better stakeholders within this debate. Second clash, though, on like actual like legal consequences and like more on like the decisions and like all that. So the first thing that they tell us is that they never tell us like essentially like, wait, I'm just trying to read my handwriting. Okay, anyway, okay, so basically they try to say that we didn't actually give any reasons as to why like better consequences will be true, etc. I want to note a few things here. The first thing that they tried to say was that essentially like people in the legal system had like actually no proceedings of the law. But I actually want to ask the panel, so what? They never actually gave a substantial reason besides the fact that they are legal representatives, so they know what they're doing. If anything, because these are people that are simply legally trained, and this is taking them at their very best, they know the loopholes of the system. In comparison, are the jury, they have no ability to just exploit their decisions to their to like vested interests or biases. These are people that are simply trained to execute oh, someone might be a doctor, someone may be like a salesman, etc. But I want to note that it is still unclear why normal people can't decide, because they are also affected by the decisions that occur from the legal system, right? But if anything, these people are actually more vulnerable than people like, for example, who are richer, like the jury, etc. Hence why they need a more active role, because a lot of the time the essentially like a lot of the decisions that are made by the rich essentially don't affect them, right? But secondly, I want to note that like with the bribing that occurs in judges, etc., that is exactly why it is so different on our side, because I want to note that the risk is spread out. But also, if a crime is from the lower class, and I want to like actually like deconstruct the logic of the opposition, if crime is from the lower class, then they don't have the financial capital to bribe every single person on the jury, right? That is simply unfeasible. That is not a comparative that they can try to push in this debate, because like they literally conceded to our characterization of this debate, that oftentimes these are done within like the lower class parameters. But what is the comparative? It is far easier to corrupt or bribe a singular judge, right? And this was analysis that they simply tried to skew their way, but it doesn't actually work. But now I'll deal with the last and final like clash of this debate, which is about the general public and the importance of the community. And the last thing that they tried to actually, this is the only thing they tried to say here, which is that, oh, the community, they use their emotions, they are irrational. But we gave literally reasons from first that they simply wanted to ignore. But this does not occur for two reasons. Number one, because there needs to be consensus. One person acting irrationally or two people acting irrationally in a vast number of like 20 individuals is not going to like just slide, right? And especially when everyone needs to be heard, when you have time to think about the decisions and the rationale that you come into like over the past few days, that is when you need to act rationally and have that consensus, in comparison to a judge where you can simply make decisions on a whim, right? But secondly, is that oftentimes vested interests will be ruled out. Obviously, someone who is very close to the perpetrator is not going to be put on the jury. That is common sense, because these are like legal parameters that people cannot step, and essentially people with vested interests will be ruled out. In the absence of this, though, when you don't include people, you essentially have a moral panic. That is when people don't feel like they are involved in the decisions that occur in the community. This is when people feel excluded. This is when people feel unsafe. This is when you allow people who are guilty to often go away with the crimes that they have like perpetrated, and often where you have wrong persecution because of the unique knowledge that people have on the ground. Not only have we proved rationale within the jury, but we also proved better legal consequences, and our characterization still stands strong in this debate. I have never been prouder to propose.
All right, I thank the second proposition speaker. Now I welcome the second opposition speaker. Ready when you are. Is the second opposition speaker here?
Yes, he's trying to connect. I don't know. He's trying to speak, but his volume is not pulling through. I'm not sure why. But yeah, Babo is here.
As for me, I can't hear anyone speak. So please, can second opposition speaker speak louder, please? Thank you. Opposition team, please, can you get your second speaker to be audible, or can someone replace the speaker, please?
Team opposition, what's the problem? You have your second speaker on the call.
Yeah, our second speaker is here. Babos, could you please try speaking? Babos. I don't know if you can reconnect. I'm not sure, but we can't hear you. Or Babos.
Maybe while your second speaker is dealing with the technical issues, someone replace the speaker, and then hopefully by the end of the second speech, the person will be ready or something.
Both my speakers dropped off the call. Yeah, it's a thing. Oh, Babos is here. I think he wants rights to speak.
Please, can the speaker try speaking
I've
now?
granted him an invitation. Guy, just accept your invitation and join the stage. So if you can hear me, Bobo, or what your name is, just click on the hand icon you have on your screen just after after the mic icon, so you can join, because I've invited you to speak. So you have to be the one to accept the invitation by clicking on the hand icon right after your mic icon. Why did you drop off again, bro? Like, can you
Um,
just start
can I
speaking?
confirm my audibility?
You're audible. Please start your speech.
Okay, good. Sorry for the connection problem. Um, I'm the second speaker for side opposition, preference POI verbally. I'll be taking POIs in my 5th minute, so please don't badger. And I'm going to be starting my debate in 3, 2, 1. Panel: A man named Robert is accused of assault. The evidence against Robert is relatively strong, but there are some inconsistency and gaps in the prosecution's case. The jury is evenly split between those who believe he was innocent. One named Susan is undecided and feels a lot of pressure from the juries of the decision. The biggest question is, what do you think Susan should do? Should she vote guilty or not guilty? This we beg to oppose. 3 things I'm going to engage within the content of my speech. First off, I'm going to show you the nature of the Uganda system and why exactly said proposition have failed to understand the nature of the Ugandan system. But then secondly, I'm going to show you the harms that would exist at the point whereby we try to propose a world where jury system exists within the context of the Uganda Criminal Justice System and where exactly it affects each and every stakeholders within the context of this debate. Before I begin with my substantive panel, I would like to engage on what proposition bring to us within the context of this debate. So they basically say that there's going to be a manipulation, how manipulation is something that's going to exist on outside of the house, how lawyers that my first speaker proposed will not give a fair and diverse knowledge, how exactly the side of the house propose a diverse knowledge, that is to say, they are much more likely to get different knowledge from different perspectives. Notice that in status quo, there's a provision of appeals. At appeals, before court of appeals, you have a panel of 3 judges. At Supreme, you either have a panel of 5 or 7. Note, even if a single judge fucks up, the right to appeal is a self-correcting mechanization. Notice how this is something that is very low, how things like fake information is something that's very low within status quo. Why are judges better within this regard? First off, we think that they have much more knowledge about all of those instances. They have much more knowledge about laws and all of those instances. So, however, there's a very low tendency for them making things like false statements within current status quo, unlike what jury system would want to engage within this bit. Notice panel, we think that said proposition have failed to understand what exactly the Uganda system look like. We think my first speaker have clearly stated the nature of Uganda citizens. First off, we think that these are citizens that are uneducated within the society, but then secondly, we think they don't necessarily have knowledge about things about law and all of those stuff. So they are much more likely going to get pressurized to engage and to make decisions that are not irrational at the end of the day. Now, what are Uganda criminal justice system and where exactly do the jury system go against this? First off, the presumption of innocence, the right to legal representation, the right to appeal, the right to a fair trial, and the burden of proof. Notice how the jury goes against it. First off, it violates the presumption of innocence. It violates the presumption of innocence, as the juries may not be able to view the accused as innocent until the person is guilty. But secondly, it violates the burden of proof, as juries may not understand the legal standard of proof beyond the reasonable doubt. Thirdly, a jury system violates the right to free trial, as jury may be influence factor as such a media coverage by public opinion. But then lastly, within a jury system could violate the right to legal representation, as the juries may not understand the legal process or the roles of the defense lawyer in this regard. Then all of those things affect the core principles that exist within the Uganda criminal justice system. Now, move on to my argument. First off, on the cost and resources. Panel, note, implementing a jury system in the Uganda will strain already limited resources, requiring additional funds for jury compensation, facilities, and admission. Notice that Uganda is a developing nation, and we think that they lack in things like finances. However, at the point where we try to propose a world where jury system exists, notice that there's going to be an increased cost. Things like implementing and maintaining a jury system could divert funds from essential areas to the justice system. Things like improving the equipment facilities. Notice how this is much more likely to affect more on the economy of the state, particularly because other money which are necessary used to develop other economy with them be used to develop the jury system, and we think that this affect the economic system of the state. But then secondly, then it's going to be things like exclusion of the marginalized voices. Notice panel, certain demographics may be underrepresented by or excluded from juries, limiting diverse perspective and potentially resulting in unfair outcome, especially for the minorities. The impact of this exclusion of marginalized voices from juries with perpetuates systemic biases, potentially resulting in unjust outcome for certain demographic groups and deepening the existence of inequalities within the society. Notice how this is bad for the criminal justice system and how it goes against the core principle of the criminal justice system. But thirdly, then there's going to be things like vulnerability to manipulation. Notice the jury system could be susceptible to manipulation by external influences. Notice in status quo, within there are things like corruption do exist within status quo. However, the jury system is prone to manipulation such as influences from bigger external factors like media coverage or public opinion, undermining the impartiality of the justice system. The impact of this is that it threatens the integrity of justice system and diminishing its role as the impartial arbiter. Notice how this is something, how things like, if a criminal, notice how individuals within the society like godfathers can tend to manipulate the system and try to free a criminal from prison, and all of these things are much more likely to exist at the end of the day. Notice how there's going to be things like inconsistency in decision. In a world where jury system exists, it leads to varying verdicts for similar cases, leading to inconsistent application of justice and eroding the public trust in the legal system. Impact of this, notice what criminal justice stands for, things like provision of justice, ensuring free and fair statement on criminal issues. However, the jury system with a divergent verdict for similar cases would lead to three things. First off, confusion. Secondly, frustration. Thirdly, fostering a perception of an arbitrary justice system and diminishing the public trust. Now, let us engage on how exactly this is going to lead to backlash within the society. With this panel, jury systems have a big tendency of providing biased judgments. Things like there's a risk of juries being influenced by biases, whether based on race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic factors, potentially leading to unfair judgment. To impact under this, first off, there is at the point in time where a particular family members then gets framed for certain crimes within society, and however, as a result of jury system, that particular individual then gets to the jail. Notice how there's going to be things like retaliation from the family members, and how exactly this is more likely to harm the society at large. Things like backlash should occur. But then secondly, it can also lead to a perception of an unjust legal system and eroding public confidence in the judicial system. Are there any POs? I'm going to be taking them now. 3, 2, 1. Um, Moving on to my speech. Panel, like we've shown in our speech, we clearly stated on how exactly the nature of the Uganda system looks like, and where exactly jury system is not a place to it's not a place where how Uganda is not a place where jury system will have to exist, and where exactly all of those problems that exist within status quo is something that's going to be high at the point whereby jury system do exist. We've just showed you the arguments in our case, how things like cost of resources, how it's going to affect the economy, but then second, how there are things like manipulation of how jury system is vulnerable to manipulation, how there's going to be things like inconsistency of decision, there's going to be an exclusion of the minority voices. I think that all of these harms is something that is very dangerous to status quo. This proud to oppose.
All right, I thank the second opposition speaker for the speech. Now I welcome the third proposition speaker. Ready when you are.
Hi, can I just check that I'm audible?
You're audible.
Okay. In that case, I'll start in. Sorry, I'm just setting up my timer. I'll start my speech in 3. And I prefer verbal POIs, by the way. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'll have 2 things in my speech. Number 1, on outcomes for crimes and who can better make those decisions. And second, I'm going to talk about the impact for the general public and why representation is very important. So firstly then, on the outcomes for crimes, and like making more informed decisions, I think the main point and their whole case actually falls back onto one thing, which is to say that the average person in Uganda is not that educated. It is too complex of a subject for them to understand. And note how if we take this down, we basically take down their entire case because they have nothing else to stand on. But note here, panel, is that actually judges make decisions about things that they actually have no idea on all the time. For example, judges have to decide whether an algorithm running by a tech company is overstepping certain laws. They have to decide on whether a pharmaceutical company is breaching a patent or not. So they're actually always making decisions that they are not necessarily informed on. This is not something that is specific. But panel, compare that to what happens in a jury. You have a collective people of, let's say, 20 people that are coming together to solve a case of, let's say, like burglary. They are informed about the specific cases, and this is not like a huge issue that you have to deal with, right? It just takes them being informed about a specific scenario, and therefore they can make that decision a lot better and
So this is not something that is actually like that hard to do. You can simply take a jury, inform them about the specific case, and therefore not only do they make informed decisions, their decisions are actually much more informed than a judge who has learned things like 20 years ago and who's just trying to like remember the things that they have been taught. So this is not actually true. The like choices that the jury actually makes are much more educated, they're more recent, and the knowledge that they have is more specific, and so they can put that into the case. And because this like idea falls, they basically have no other reason to fall on as to why it is bad for like to have a jury, because we gave you 5 reasons. Note how they did not take down any one of them. Instead they like try to respond with actually like people are not that educated, but that point was taken down, so they have absolutely no reason as to why juries are like worse off, or like cannot be or like aren't educated enough to make those decisions. So second thing under this is that people are like juries is more likely to be bribed because they are poor. But firstly, like note first of all is that by quantity you simply have to bribe more people. So what does this mean? 3 things. Firstly is that the bribing money that you have to put is going to be 20 times the amount. So prior it might have been easier to bribe one judge because it was just one sum of money that you have to give, but now you have to bribe 20 like 20 people, so it's just simply more difficult. The average person who's in the middle class is probably not able to bribe like that many people. But second, note is that 20 people need to accept your bribery, and only the probability of one person disagreeing, not accepting, means that you are caught in this like it means that they are caught in the system, and the fact that they like it's a lot easier for you to be caught because only one person disagreeing can put you in jail, and it can have huge consequences that are simply not worth it. But third and final thing under this is that the poor people are less powerful, they are aware of this, and as a result they themselves are more scared of the legal system. They're aware of the repercussions that can come out of bribery, right? This isn't something that is like that's shocking or news to them. And so because they're less powerful, because they have a lot on the line, because they only have like a very little amount of money that they have saved up, it's a lot harder to like bribe them because they're scared of the legal system and its repercussions. But compare all of this to just like bribing one judge who is basically above the law, who's considered very powerful. It is a lot easier to bribe that one individual. So what does all of this mean? All of this means it is much more difficult and almost impossible to bribe a jury. And so note how this takes in a jury, it only takes one good person to prevent the bribe and to not accept what is happening, because you need a consensus in whatever decision is being made. So if you have one good person in a 20 person jury, then that is enough to stop the bribery and to ignore all of its like consequences. But on their side, there is simply nothing to stop a bribery from happening. So under this, we easily prove how we have better decisions because of the reasons we gave, which were again not responded to. We have to get a response to every single one of them. Like firstly, on how you have an interest for the community. There's a direct safety hazard for you if you let out someone who is like actively stealing. That can directly impact your local shop, for example, that you have. And so you have to care about that for yourself, for your family. But second is that it's harder to corrupt because we already proved why there's less likely to be bribery, and like even if bribery were to happen, it's too many things have to be applied, and the risk is spread. Fourth, we told you there's no hasty decisions. Just because a jury was in a bad mood for whatever reason was in a bad mood doesn't mean that this will reflect on the person being tried. And last thing is that you're more aware of your community, you're aware of your surroundings, you can be more lenient and understanding to the people that you are trying. Before I move on to my second issue, I'll take your point.
Don't you think that given the fact that a consensus is always needed to make a decision, it then slows down the proceedings of the criminal justice system, and that means that justice is served later, which then harms the society?
Sure, we are willing to take waiting a day longer or 24 hours longer rather than having immediate decisions taken by a jury who was likely bribed and just making fast decisions on the go because they have 10 people that they need to trial. So sure, we are willing to take the cost of time rather than to have wrongful decisions, especially when you consider someone, for example, guilty, they're thrown in jail, and you don't give them a chance for parole, things like that are literally life-changing for people, and you're just deciding because you want to do that faster. We don't think that is something that we are willing to take. We need justice to be served regardless of the time. Secondly, then on the impact for general public and the importance of representation. So what we told you from first is that there is a moral panic. Not every crime committed is not every crime committed is just to that person itself, but there's sometimes it's a public thing where people need an answer. There's an emotional need. You do that for political stability, and you need to do it because to settle the panic that happens all over your nation. What they say is actually societal validation is bad, but panel note the contradiction in their statement. Because firstly, they say, well, actually, the jury will make a decision, a correct decision, because the jury will make a decision because the public agree and they have to follow what the people want, and so their decisions are going to be based on emotions, based on what people want, basically. And then they also say that actually the judge won't commit stupid decisions because they need societal validation. This is a contradiction in of itself. It's either that the judge doesn't care about societal validation and that's a good thing, or it's that the judge cares about societal validation and that's why they're gonna commit those stupid mistakes. And so because this is very contradictory, we actually explained how this works, that the jury represents the people and that's actually a good thing, but the judges simply don't have an incentive, they don't have a hand to play in this, they're not losing anything. And so overall, the impact of this is that judges essentially have no reason to not commit those stupid mistakes, to not just basically give a judgment, as you were saying, just because they want to finish faster. And so because of that, they're affluent, they're not part of society, they're not directly harmed. There is simply no way to actually stop the repercussions happening. And this is exactly why prisons in Uganda are overflowed, because they don't follow those policies that they're supposed to follow. Instead, they don't follow the innocent till proven guilty that you want, because they just want to try people as fast as possible, go home, and basically have no repercussion about all the horrible acts that they've been committing. For all those reasons, proud to propose.
All right, I thank the proposition third speaker. Now I welcome the opposition third speaker. Ready when you are. Opposition third speaker, are you there?
Blossom is trying to speak currently, but her network is refusing again. I don't know why. I think she should just rejoin.
Please, is the third pro there? Please start your, sorry, third up. Please start your speech. Please, where's the third opposition speaker? Oh?
Hey, my speaker's microphone seems not to be working, and I'm trying to resort to like calling her so she could speak through my phone, if that's better.
Please, has the mic issue been resolved now?
I'm just trying to get to her by connecting to her through my phone. I'm trying to call her in her phone.
Is it possible that probably the speaker doesn't have a speaking role or permission to speak? Please, can you accept an invitation if it has already been sent to you? Or please, can the tab master send an invitation if it hasn't been sent already?
Buttercup, may I ask what exactly is the problem with your speaker's mic?
My speaker's microphone has refused to work. I don't know. It's just refusing to speak. So I'm just trying to call her right now so that she can just deliver the speech through my phone.
Exercise patience, then
It's been over 2 minutes. Please, where is the third opposition speaker?
What's the progress report now?
She's not picking up, but I'm calling her.
Okay, so I'm just going to be giving the grace of 3 minutes, which I think is more than enough. So at the end of the 3 minutes, if your speaker doesn't show up, you just have to iron this round. But I guess you know what that means in terms of the tournament policy. Okay, so I think it's over now. So you just have to continue the debate, Buttercup, so we can move on with this round. Buttercup, confirm you heard me.
Yes, please. Hi. I've gotten in touch with her. She's going to be speaking.
Hello, right.
Can you please hear her? Can you hear her right now? Cynthia, please speak.
Yeah, I can hear. I can hear. Chair, confirm you can hear. Can your speaker speak, please, so we can know what to do? Like we are wasting enough time already.
Okay, so you're going to start, eh? Okay, she's here. Is she audible?
We can't confirm if she's not speaking.
Cynthia, please speak.
Like,
Can you ask her to read the motion just for us to test the
Cynthia, please read
frequency
the
and
motion.
accuracy?
Cynthia, first read the motion. Just repeat again.
The audio is sort of like breaking. Okay,
Just
just
repeat
allow
it
to
again.
speak again.
Cynthia, please speak again. Yes, speak again. This house, please read the motion again. The motion again. Cynthia.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think I'm just so sorry. Hard luck. I think we just have to move on with your speech. Doesn't matter. Just move on with your speech. We'll have a discussion about that later on. Just move on with your speech, please. We have already wasted more than 15 minutes.
Let me just set up my notes.
All right. So you just have 1 minute to do that, so we can start already.
Hi, is this gonna be third up, or is this gonna be the reply speaker?
It's third opposition speech.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. Hello. Am I audible? Let me first tell them. Am I audible? Hey, am I audible? Can I be heard?
Yes, you're audible. Please move on.
So Cynthia is going to be speaking. I think she's worked on her issues. Please, Cynthia, you can go on.
Opposition, I really don't know what you're taking us for, really. We can't
Yes,
hear the
please.
Cynthia and we are wasting more time.
Cynthia, just okay. Hey, we were requesting if you could just have at least two more minutes. If she doesn't come, I'll just end the speech, like the last chance.
I am sorry. I think we've given your team enough grace, given the fact that we didn't extend the same grace to some teams that had the same issue in the last previous out round. So please, there is no more 2 more minutes. Either you start your speech now in 1 minute, or we move ahead of your team and we just move straight to the reply speech.
Okay, let me just set up my speech and I begin.
At this point, I don't know what to say anymore. Please, can someone just give the third opposition speaker speech? Or we move on to the next speech that's supposed to be given in the debate, please.
Okay, I'm here. Blossom has come back. She's trying to tell you to give her rights to speak. I think she has fixed her network issues.
Sincerely, at this point in time, we cannot be waiting for someone to try again. It's been almost over 5 minutes. Please, I'm
If
begging.
she refuses, if it fails, I'm ready to give the speech. But could you just give her a chance? Blossom, please unmute your microphone. Or I'll be starting the speech myself. Please try speaking. Okay. I think since the microphone has refused, hopefully I'm still audible, right? Am I still audible?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to be starting my speech in a few. Let me just start. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Important to note in this debate is the nature of the jury system. It is made up of ordinary people in the society. This essentially means that they have not studied the legal proceedings to the greatest of extent, but also, secondly, they are not informed on the criminal justice system and how it works. We tell you from first speech and second speech, this is a hindrance to the criminal justice system and to these individuals who are being tried. Why? Because of two particular things. Firstly, the fact that these individuals do not necessarily know what to do in many circumstances when they get different cases, it then becomes an infringement because they can make wrong jurisdictions and wrong verdicts, which then potentially harm even innocent citizens. But also, secondly, we think for an individual to be tried, they have to be tried by people who actually know the nature of the thing in order to uplift the criminal justice system. We oppose this motion. What do we get from side opposition from the start of this debate? I'm going to summarize it in 4 things.
TOA.
Firstly, we get an idea on how on their side of the house, I'll take you in my 6th minute. It is in the community's best interest to do these particular things. Notice that the only clear justification that we get from them is that since these are people and this is their community, they then want to care about their community. Notice that firstly, this is something that cannot be credited in this debate because they do not give us clear logical links as to why it is something that is actually true within this particular debate. But also secondly, we tell you from first that these are ordinary people and the fact that Uganda is characterized of having illiterate individuals or majority of people who are poor and they're trying to make a living, these individuals then become liable to the whole thing of being liable to bribes. The only response that we get from side opposition is that these individuals are too many to be bribed. Notice that at this particular instance, given the fact that they are very poor in the vast majority of instances, any sort of amount of money could really bribe them. At this instance, they cannot necessarily take this debate. But also thirdly, we tell you that on their side of the house or in society, there's something that exists called social media. This essentially means that these individuals, given the fact that they are not that educated, but also secondly, they are just normal ordinary people within society, this means that they can then be liable to different things that then happen within the society or that happen on social media. This essentially means that even if a criminal not that guilty of their case, they can then be coerced by social media to then make this individual guilty, or they can be coerced by the public. This essentially means that there is no accountability on their side and the criminal justice system then falls out in all instances. But also finally, we tell you that the fact at a point in time where these are just ordinary people you're picking at different instances, they really have nothing to lose, right? These individuals are just ordinary people. It could be a salesman, it could be just one of those upcoming doctors, or it could be just a student who's like in university. At this particular instance, these individuals do not have any particular things to lose losing the vast majority of instances. This means that they can then make unjustified opinions, or they can then make unjustified rulings, and then this then hampers the criminal justice system. Secondly, they tell us something on how judges can then necessarily be biased within status quo on our side of the house. Firstly, we give you an idea on like how judges actually take an oath before they actually make any proceeding, or before they then necessarily become like judges. This oath is characterized by things like them always saying that they will never be like impartial, but also secondly, then at the point in time when they become impartial, they can then be removed from like that whole part of being a judge. At this particular instance, this then firstly morally obligates them not to do this particular act of being unjustified, but also secondly, it then pushes them to always be very good. But also, secondly, we tell you that on their side of the house, judges need to always, on our side of the house, judges need to always keep their image. I'll take you in the 6 minutes. Please shut up. Judges always need to keep their image in the vast majority of instances. Why is this true? Because firstly, for them to actually be allowed to take on other huger cases, right, they always have to make good rulings that the society is then going to accept in the vast majority of instances. We tell you that at a point in time where this is true, it then necessarily means that they are less likely going to be impartial on our side of the house. But also, secondly, we tell you, given the fact that these are judges, right, they've already accumulated a certain amount of wealth. At this particular instance, they are less liable to bribes in the vast majority of instances. But also, finally, and important to note, is that these people have studied. They have studied the law. They have studied the legal framework that exists within the society. They have studied and spent over 20 years understanding how to then take up different cases as to how they come. At this instance, they're less likely going to make bad decisions. But notice on their side of the house, we give individuals who have really never studied the law. Notice that at this particular ground, we then take which side then has more accountability, the question accountability. But also secondly, right, their second idea is on how we then give choices back to the minority in the vast majority of instances. They firstly concede that these people normally do not know about the law, or they do not know about legal proceedings. That is why we should then give them a chance to like work here. Notice that this is something that is then harmful, given the fact that, well, firstly, they contradict their whole case that they were trying to say that these people will be informed. That means that they then fall out on that instance. But also, secondly, we tell you that they then concede that these people don't know. This necessarily infringes on like those individuals who are being tried, their right to be tried by individuals who then know what they're actually being tried, or who then know that different things that the different proceedings within the criminal justice system. I'll take your POI now.
Thank you very much. So Team Proposition has already told you that people not being represented causes a loss of trust in the legal system, leading to community policing without authorities involved. Does the opposition not believe then that the subsequent lack of regulation that arises because of this renders their case null and void?
In time where different governments then are voted in by different individuals. For example, the Ugandan government that is then voted in by like the whole democratic system. This essentially means that you give these individuals the power. You give the government the power to choose the judges that are then necessarily going to be working on your cases. And at this particular point in time, it then becomes justified. But even if that wasn't the case, we tell you that at a point in time where we then get benefits, which is basically upholding the criminal justice system, or secondly, giving people the fair trials that they necessarily need, at this particular instance, it is then justified to take away choice. Thirdly, we think that on their whole consensus model, it then becomes harmful to them, because notice that the decisions within the criminal justice system are then going to take long to happen. What is the impact of this? Firstly, the fact that justice is taking long will then hamper the progress of the criminal justice system. This essentially means that it is liable to being broken down, which is something that is bad. What do we tell you on our side of the house? We tell you two particular things. Firstly, we tell you how an argument on like how there's on our side of the house, there's the criminal law that we have to uphold, and their side of the house is the liability rate. But also, secondly, we tell you how the perception that is then created within status quo is something that is harmful. Notice that we show you how on our side of the house, we then have individuals like judges who actually know the legal system, people who have studied law, people who are then impartial within the vast majority of instances, because firstly, they have their images to keep, but also secondly, they already have the money, so they cannot necessarily be bribed. At this particular instance, we then get three different impacts. Firstly, we tell you that we get justice that is then necessarily served within the society because of like these good judges. Secondly, we tell you that we get a better societal perception of individuals in society. And finally, we give the people the justice that they want. Proud to give two speeches within this debate.
second reply speaker. Ready when you are.
Hey, I think I'll be giving reply too. Is that okay?
Yes, it's okay, Buttercup.
Okay. Let me just set my timer. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, let us look at Uganda as a country. It is characterized of two major things. Firstly, many individuals within Uganda are illiterate. This essentially means that they lack the common understanding as to what the vital processes within society then look like. This looks like political processes, or secondly, this looks like different processes like voting in the vast majority of instances. But also, secondly, even the well-educated individuals within Uganda never take caution to learn about the different aspects of society. Why? We tell you this is true because of two particular aspects. Firstly, because these individuals are always busy working for their families in the vast majority of instances. What their side of the house then necessarily looked like within this debate was giving these kinds of individuals the power to determine people's fate within legal proceedings. And that is something that is inherently unjustified that we then oppose as side opposition within this debate. What do we necessarily get from them? We get three major arguments from side proposition. Firstly, in the whole idea as to how they then have accountability on their side of the house when they carry out this particular instance. Secondly, how they give choice back to the community and why that is something that is good. Finally, how they then get some sort of consensus and remove the rigidities within the criminal justice system. We tell you a few couple of responses to this particular things. The idea of the accountability within the different sides of the house. Notice that on their side of the house, the fact that they give individuals who do not know the law, it then hampers on the whole thing of accountability because these people do not then make the right choices in the vast majority of instances because they do not necessarily know how the laws should actually happen. But also, secondly, we tell you that the fact that these are the lower class individuals within society, these individuals then become liable to different things like bribes within society because they need the money in order to develop themselves or to pay for different expenses that they have within society. Also, thirdly, we tell you that the whole idea of social media then existing within society then acts as a coercion to these different groups of individuals within society in order to then take the public perception instead of taking the legal perception, which is something that is good within society. But also, finally, given the fact that these individuals then necessarily have nothing to lose within society, it then acts as something that infringes on their accountability. But on our side of the house, what do we necessarily
are like prisons overflowing with the amount of individuals in Uganda right now. But secondly, even if like that's true, you literally have to get a new jury when consensus cannot be made. That was framing and characterization we brought from our first no response. But thirdly, who actually has the ability to decide? Note that judges make decisions even when they don't know like about like the actual case in itself all the time, right? It looks like if a judge has to make a decision on a pharmaceutical company, like sort of like breaking a patent, right? But what is the comparative? Teaching a jury specific laws is quite easy. Now you have more perspectives like coming in, and it bridges the expertise gap. They, like, for example, they brought up doctors. That's exactly why they would be useful in the jury. They have the perspective on, for example, a pharmaceutical case where they're infringing on a patent. Juries have like for more technical like ability to decide guilty or innocent. It is easier to pick up laws with the technicalities of different industries. So we take that point. Second clash then on the community. And I want to note that their comparative is far worse. People do not feel represented. They lose that trust in the legal system. They don't feel like the legal system has their best interests at heart. And this is exacerbated by the amount of inequality that often exists between the lower class and the like higher class, such as judges, etc. So what is the alternative then? That leads to community policing, where people just don't call the police when crimes happen. There's absolutely no regulation. So this means all of their benefits fall, because even if they had the best judge in the world, no one reports these crimes anymore. No one feels any trust within the like jurisdiction. Therefore, that is exactly why they don't take any of their benefits in this debate. In our world, the community actually feels represented. Why? Because we gave like a large amount of substantive in our case, right? We told you about the emotional need for justice that is only fulfilled when they have an active role in the decision. Because oftentimes in the like comparison, like when you only have a judge and one singular person making that decision, there would often be a moral panic. People do not feel represented. People feel as if something that could affect their family and their entire community is completely out of their hands. So in like just by the end of this debate, we have not just proven better decisions, we have also proven that it is far better for the community. We essentially like lessen the amount of moral panic that will occur in society. That is exactly why their whip speaker told us to shut up, because they knew their case was null and void. If you give this ballot to opposition, it is a clear like loss. For us, it is a win.
Yeah. For your wonderful speeches. I thank you for bringing this debate to an end. Please, can all judges join me in room 1 deliberation room? And we're going to have 2 minutes of, just going through our notes. Then you send in your ballots to me through the privately in the text space. But please, let's join the deliberation room now. Thank you.